The snow fell thick and relentless that Christmas Eve, blanketing the streets of Cleveland in an eerie silence. Inside a cramped shelter on East 55th Street, 7-year-old Maya pressed her face against the frosted window, her breath creating small circles of fog on the glass. Her mother, Sarah, sat on the edge of a donated cot, her hands trembling, as she tried to wrap a broken doll she'd found in the donation bin. It wasn't much, but it was all she had to give her daughter for Christmas. "Mommy," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ancient radiator. "Do you think God forgot us?" The question hung in the air like a weight, crushing Sarah's already fractured heart. How do you explain to a child that sometimes life just isn't fair? That a sudden layoff, an eviction notice, and a broken-down car can unravel everything you've built? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, tears silently traced paths down her weathered cheeks. What Sarah didn't know was that someone had heard Maya's question. And unlike so many who might have simply felt sympathy and moved on, this person was about to do something that would change everything. Marcus Thompson wasn't supposed to be at the shelter that night. The 34-year-old construction worker had his own problems. He was a single father raising 2 kids after his wife died 3 years earlier from cancer. Money was always tight, and the holidays were especially hard without Emma around. But Marcus had made a promise to his late wife. No matter how difficult things got, they would always find ways to help others. It was Emma who had volunteered at this very shelter, and continuing her work felt like keeping her memory alive. He'd come to drop off some toys his kids had outgrown when he overheard Maya's question through the thin partition wall. Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, a box of donated items in his hands, as the little girl's words echoed in his mind. "Do you think God forgot us?" Marcus set down the box and leaned against the wall, his own eyes stinging. He thought about his daughter, Zoe, who was 8, just a year older than this little girl. He thought about his son, Tyler, who at 10 was trying so hard to be the man of the house. And he thought about Emma, who would have known exactly what to do in this moment. Then something shifted inside him. Emma used to say that sometimes people aren't looking for God to show up in a burning bush or a pillar of fire. Sometimes they just need to see him in the actions of ordinary people who choose to care. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hey, Rob, it's Marcus. I know it's Christmas Eve, but I need a favor." "Actually, I need a lot of favors." What happened next would become the stuff of local legend, though Marcus never wanted credit for any of it. He started by calling his crew from the construction site, guys he'd worked alongside for years. Then he called his church group, his neighbors, and even his late wife's book club that still met monthly. Within an hour, his phone was buzzing with responses. By 8 p.m. that Christmas Eve, something remarkable began to unfold at the shelter. Sarah had finally gotten Maya to sleep when she heard unusual commotion downstairs. The shelter director, Mrs. Patterson, appeared at their door, with a strange expression on her face, something between shock and joy. "Sarah, honey, you need to come downstairs. And bring Maya." But she just fell asleep. "Trust me. Bring her. She needs to see this." Confused and slightly worried, Sarah gently woke her daughter. Hand in hand, they descended the stairs to the common area. What they saw made them both stop in their tracks. The dreary shelter had been transformed. Christmas lights twinkled from every corner. A massive tree stood where there had been nothing that morning, decorated with homemade ornaments and topped with a glowing star. Tables overflowed with food, not the usual shelter fare, but a real Christmas feast. Ham, turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, pies, and cookies covered every available surface. But that wasn't all. Beneath the tree sat dozens of wrapped presents, each one carefully labeled with a resident's name. Children who had been listless and sad just hours before were now squealing with excitement, their parents crying tears of disbelief and gratitude. "What? How?" Sarah couldn't form a complete sentence. Marcus emerged from the kitchen carrying another tray of food. He was wearing a ridiculous Christmas sweater that his kids had forced him into, and his eyes were tired but bright. When his gaze met Sarah's, he smiled gently. "We heard someone asking if God forgot about them," he said simply. "Wanted to make sure the answer was clear." Sarah's legs almost gave out. Mrs. Patterson steadied her as the reality sank in. All of this, the food, the gifts, the decorations, had been organized and executed in a matter of Ours by a community that had come together for no reason other than it was the right thing to do. Maya tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Are you an angel?" Marcus laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "No, sweetheart. Just a dad who knows what it's like to need help sometimes, and who had some friends willing to show up." As it turned out, Marcus had done much more than organize a Christmas party. Unbeknownst to Sarah, he'd spent those hours making phone calls that went far beyond that single evening. One of his friends owned a property management company and had an apartment coming available. Another worked in HR at a growing company and knew they were hiring. Marcus's sister was a child care provider looking for help. He'd pulled every string he could think of, not to solve all of Sarah's problems for her, but to open doors that had been slammed shut. On a small card attached to one of the gifts, under the tree, a beautiful new doll for Maya, Marcus had written a simple note. "God didn't forget you. Sometimes he just works through the hands of his people. You're not alone." As the evening progressed, Sarah watched her daughter laugh and play with other children, her face alight with a joy that had been absent for months. The broken doll Sarah had tried to wrap was forgotten, replaced by new gifts and, more importantly, renewed hope. Marcus's own children, Zoe and Tyler, had come with him to help serve food. Sarah watched as they moved through the shelter with practiced ease, comfortable and kind, clearly used to this kind of service. When she finally got a moment to talk with Marcus alone, she had to ask, "Why did you do all this? You don't even know us." Marcus looked across the room at his kids, then back at Sarah. "My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. For months after. I was angry at God, angry at the world, felt forgotten too. But people showed up for us, brought meals, watched the kids, helped with bills. They didn't have to. Most of them barely knew us. But they did it anyway." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma used to say that we're all just walking each other home. When someone falls, you help them up, not because you'll get something out of it, but because one day you might be the one who falls, and you'll need someone to believe you're worth helping too." Sarah couldn't hold back her tears anymore. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," Marcus said firmly. "Just promise me something. When you get back on your feet, and you will, you'll do the same for someone else. That's how this works. That's how we all survive." In the weeks that followed, Sarah got the job interview Marcus had arranged. She aced it. The apartment became available, and with help from the community fund Marcus had quietly organized, she could afford the deposit. Maya started at a new school, where she made friends and slowly returned to being the bright, hopeful child she'd been before their world fell apart. But perhaps the most profound change was in Sarah herself. She started volunteering at the shelter on weekends. She organized a clothing drive at her new workplace. When she saw someone struggling, she didn't look away. She helped. Because Marcus had taught her something invaluable. None of us make it alone, and there's profound power in choosing to show up for each other. 2 years later, on another Christmas Eve, Sarah stood in that same shelter, not as a resident, but as a volunteer. Maya was beside her, helping to serve food and hand out gifts. They'd made it a tradition. Marcus was there too, as he was every year, with Zoe and Tyler in tow. When he saw Sarah, he grinned and walked over. "Looks like you kept your promise," he said. Sarah smiled, watching her daughter laugh with the children, who were where she'd once been, wondering if anyone cared. "Someone very wise once told me we're all just walking each other home." Seemed like advice worth taking. As the evening wound down and Sarah tucked Maya into bed that night in their own apartment, her daughter looked up at her with those same big eyes that had once held so much despair. "Mommy, remember when I asked if God forgot us?" Sarah brushed hair from her daughter's face. "I remember, baby. He didn't forget us, did he? He just sent Mr. Marcus." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart full. "No, sweetheart. He didn't forget us. And we're never going to forget anyone else either." Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time it felt different. Not like a curtain of isolation, but like a blanket of peace. Inside their warm apartment, with full bellies and hope restored, Sarah and Maya drifted off to sleep. Proof that sometimes the answer to a prayer doesn't come from the sky. Sometimes it comes from the human heart that chooses to care, to act, to show up when it would be easier to walk away. And in those moments, the divine and the human become impossible to separate. Because that's exactly how it's supposed to work.